Ever wonder how a simple box of Jell-O or a loaf of Wonder Bread completely changed the way Americans lived? Believe it or not, these everyday items from the 1950s didn't just make meals easier, they sparked a revolution that completely transformed family life, women's roles, and even the design of our homes. The America we know today was shaped in part by these humble convenience foods. The 1950s was boom time in America. Suburbs were popping up everywhere. Everyone wanted the latest gadgets, and optimism was in the air. But behind those white picket fences, a quiet revolution was happening in kitchens across the country. Suddenly, grocery store shelves were packed with foods that promised to make life easier. Frozen vegetables that didn't need washing or chopping, pre-sliced bread that eliminated the daily kneading and baking ritual, and cake mixes that turned anyone into a baker with just an egg and some water. These weren't just new products, they were changing the very fabric of American life. Let's dive into how these convenient innovations completely reshaped society in ways that are still with us today. After World War II, the food industry took all those technologies they developed for feeding troops and pointed them straight at the American homemaker. Suddenly, the grocery store became a wonderland of time-saving options. Think about your standard grocery run in 1940 versus 1955. In 1940, you'd be lugging home whole vegetables that needed cleaning, peeling, and chopping. By 1955, you could grab a box of bird's eye frozen peas that were already cleaned, shelled, and ready to heat. Need bread? In 1940, many families still baked their own or bought unsliced loaves. By the mid-50s, Wonder Bread and other brands had popularized pre-sliced bread that stayed fresh longer and came in consistent, perfect slices every time. The canned goods aisle exploded too. Campbell's condensed soups meant a complete meal was minutes away. Just add water and heat. Canned fruits eliminated seasonal limitations. Spam, initially popularized during wartime rationing, became a convenient protein that never spoiled. And let's not forget the ultimate symbol of food convenience, the TV dinner. When Swanson debuted their frozen turkey dinner in 1954 for 98 cents, they weren't just selling food, they were selling time. Pop it in the oven, and 25 minutes later, you had a complete meal with no prep and barely any cleanup. But these products didn't just change dinner time, they were about to completely flip American daily routines upside down. But before convenience foods hit the scene, the typical American home revolved around food preparation. It wasn't just an activity, it was practically a full-time job. Picture a typical day in 1940. Your morning starts with building a fire in the stove. Breakfast means peeling potatoes for hash, mixing and rolling out biscuit dough. Lunch requires more preparation from scratch. Dinner prep might start right after lunch, especially if you're making bread, which needs time to rise. Even a simple dessert like Jell-O would take hours to prepare without instant mixes. Fast forward to 1955. Breakfast? Pour some instant cream of wheat or pop bread in the toaster. Lunch might be a sandwich with pre-sliced bread and cup of canned soup. Dinner could be ready in under an hour with frozen vegetables, instant mashed potatoes, and pre-seasoned meat. All those hours spent in daily food prep suddenly vanished, creating something that previous generations of homemakers rarely experienced: free time. The kitchen was no longer a workspace that demanded constant attention, but became integrated into family living areas because meal prep was quick enough to do while socializing. And speaking of that extra time, wait until you see what it did to the American economy. All that time saved in the kitchen didn't just disappear. It flowed into entirely new activities and industries that reshaped the American economy. With dinner now possible to prepare in minutes, families could gather around their television sets, leading to the explosion of TV ownership from just 9% of homes in 1950 to over 85% by 1960. No coincidence that TV dinners and TV viewing boomed simultaneously. Women who previously spent their days cooking could now pursue other interests like crafting, community organizations, or even paid employment. The convenience food revolution quietly supported women's entry into the workforce by making it possible to balance a job with feeding a family. Picture this scene. A woman returns from her office job at 5:30, pops a frozen dinner in the oven, adds a salad from pre-washed lettuce and bottled dressing, and still has a complete meal on the table by 6 o'clock. This simply wasn't possible before. Sales of hobby supplies, magazines, and leisure products skyrocketed as Americans suddenly had time to pursue interests beyond meal preparation. Even the shopping experience transformed. Supermarkets expanded dramatically in the 1950s to accommodate all these new packaged products, replacing smaller grocery stores where clerks fetched items for customers. And the food industry wasn't subtle about marketing these changes. A 1955 Bird's Eye ad boldly proclaimed, "Quick frozen foods save you hours of kitchen drudgery." Convenience wasn't just a feature, it was the main selling point. But these changes weren't just economic. They completely rewired American social connections. Traditionally, recipes and cooking techniques were passed down through generations, grandmothers teaching mothers teaching daughters. Food preparation often brought communities together, with neighbors sharing techniques for canning vegetables or baking bread. Convenience foods disrupted these long-standing social patterns. When cake comes from a Betty Crocker box with foolproof instructions, you don't need to learn the feel of proper cake batter from your mother. When vegetables come frozen and pre-cut, you don't need to learn from your grandmother when they're in season or how to select the best ones. The expertise shifted from family kitchens to corporate test kitchens. Food scientists, not grandmothers, became the authorities on how food should taste. Instructions came from packages, not family recipes passed down through generations. Community cooking events, like canning parties or baking days, became less necessary. Why spend a day canning tomatoes with neighbors when you could buy them ready to use on your next grocery trip? Even family dynamics changed. With meal prep taking less time, families spent less time working together in the kitchen, but more time eating together, often in front of the television. The TV dinner wasn't just named for convenience. It reflected a new reality where meals and entertainment merged. But while these social patterns were changing locally, something even bigger was happening on a national scale. Before convenience foods, what Americans ate varied wildly depending on region, ethnicity, and season. Southern cooking barely resembled New England fare. Midwest dinner tables looked nothing like those in California. Convenience foods changed all that, creating a standardized American diet from coast to coast. Wonder Bread tasted identical, whether you bought it in Seattle or Miami. Green giant peas came in the same consistent size and flavor nationwide. Betty Crocker cake mix produced the same yellow cake everywhere. Kraft macaroni and cheese delivered the same familiar taste to children across the country. Seasonal variations faded too. Before frozen foods, strawberries were a spring treat, fresh corn was a summer luxury, and many vegetables simply disappeared in winter. With frozen and canned goods, seasonal eating became optional. Imagine the novelty of serving fresh green beans at Christmas dinner. Regional food traditions didn't disappear, but they began to fade as national brands dominated grocery shelves. The distinctive local cuisines that once defined American regions began blending into a more homogenized national palate. Food advertising accelerated this trend. National TV commercials created shared food experiences and expectations across the country. When millions of Americans watched the same Jell-O commercial during I Love Lucy, they developed similar food associations and desires. But this newfound food uniformity came with some consequences that nobody saw coming. When convenience foods first appeared, they were marketed as modern, scientific, and nutritious. Advertisements boasted about vitamin-enriched products and scientifically developed formulations. The public generally trusted these claims. After all, science was bringing incredible advances in every area of life. What wasn't understood at the time were the nutritional trade-offs happening in processed foods. Canned vegetables often contained significant added salt for preservation. Instant mixes frequently included more sugar and fat to improve taste and texture. Preservatives extended shelf life, but added chemicals not present in fresh foods. Refined white bread and rice removed nutritional fiber found in whole grains. Processing often stripped away nutrients that were then artificially added back. Compare a home-cooked meal from 1940 with a convenience meal from 1955. The 1940 meal, freshly roasted chicken and vegetables from the garden. The 1955 meal, Swanson's TV dinner with processed turkey, instant mashed potatoes, and canned gravy. Both provided calories and basic nutrition, but their long-term health impacts were dramatically different. Food companies tackled some obvious nutritional issues, enriching bread with B vitamins to prevent deficiencies, for example. But the overall shift toward higher sodium, more sugar, more preservatives, and less fiber would eventually contribute to rising rates of heart disease, diabetes, and obesity in the following decades. The convenience food revolution essentially traded time for nutrition, a bargain that seemed excellent in the moment but would have consequences generations later. Those seemingly simple innovations, like sliced bread, frozen vegetables, and cake mixes, didn't just change what was on America's plates. They fundamentally reorganized society. They transformed daily schedules, altered home design, enabled women to enter the workforce in greater numbers, created entirely new industries, standardized the American palate, changed how cooking knowledge was shared, and established eating patterns that still influence health outcomes today. What looked like simple convenience turned out to be one of the most significant social revolutions in modern American history, all starting with a simple box of frozen peas or pre-sliced bread. If you found this peek into how everyday food items completely changed American life interesting, hit that like button and subscribe for more videos that uncover the surprising stories behind ordinary things. Drop a comment sharing your favorite convenience food from back in the day, whether it's Jell-O, TV dinners, or something else entirely. And if you're too young to remember these classics, let us know which modern convenience foods you couldn't live without.